Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Follow the Leader. I'm your host, Lee Larson, and from Hayes, Montana, folks, I bring to you Michael Blackwolf. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me, Lee. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Folks, Michael Blackwolf is here joining us today. He is running for U.S. Senate here in Montana. He's on the eastern side of the divide. He's going after Dane's seat, going after Hummert, Bankhead, competing against, I guess as you say, Hummert and Bankhead and Neal for Dane's seat. And I'm super excited that you have thrown your hat into the ring. Michael, you are an enrolled Gravant member, a tribal member. You're from Fort Belknap, the reservation. Talk to us a little bit about your upbringing and your roots here in Montana.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, once again, thanks for having me. As you said, I'm an enrolled member of the Grovon tribe here at Fort Belknap. That for those that don't know, we're like right smack dab in the middle of north central Montana. And we have two tribes here at Fort Belknap. We have the Assiniboine and Grovon tribe. My mother is a member of the Grovon tribe, and my dad is a member of the Cree tribe from the Rocky Boys Indian Reservation, the Chippewa Cree tribe and Rocky Boy. And I was born here, enrolled here at Fort Belknap, and at about year and a half old, moved to Rocky Boy and spent my childhood and my preteens and my adolescence and my young adulthood. Graduated from high school in Rocky Boy way back in 1989, and from there went off to college, met my wife, and we started our family, and we have 3 adult children now and 6 grandchildren, 2 grandsons and 4 granddaughters, and we have another one on the way. But yeah, so even though I was raised primarily in Rocky Boy, spent significant amount of time with my maternal grandfather here in Fort Belknap and Hayes, and I unfortunately did not have the pleasure to know my maternal grandmother. She had passed away prior to my birth. So was very fortunate though to still have my grandfather, and he was very knowledgeable in the Grovon ways of life, customs, ceremonies, songs, language, and so even though I didn't grow up here in Fort Belknap, I was had a lot of exposure to my Grovon ways, and decided to move here in 1995, and this is where my wife and I set up our roots, and we've been here since November of '95. So, yeah, that's kind of me in Hayes, Montana, and by way of Rocky Boy, Montana.
Well, and that's really special that you got to learn so much, like you said, of your, I think you called them ways, from your grandfather, and keeping the Grovant. Um, I don't know. I see in the background you have some strings and fabrics. Do you also like sew and bead? Is that
Oh
right?
yeah, so that back there is the sewing stuff that my wife and I use. My wife does quilting. I actually do make native regalia. That up there is it's called a bustle. That's a bustle that I made for my oldest son, and so it needs some repairs. That's why it's here at our house instead of at his house. So I got to do some repair work on that for him. But no, yeah. So like I said, I've just like I said, was immersed, born and raised in my customs, cultures, tradition, and learned about regalia making, ceremonies, and songs growing up, and it's the only life I've known. I'm a traditional person, and it's not this is not meant to be derogatory or upsetting in any form. But I'm never set foot in a church. I've never did anything with the Western religions, Christianity, Catholicism, anything like that. But I've been real fortunate to be born to who I was, when I was, where I was, and that includes being raised and being fortunate to have my paternal grandparents heavily influenced who I was. My dad and my uncles, again, a huge influence, impact on my formative years, and molding me into the man that I would become and the man that I am.
Yeah. Well, I I see that the sense of community is profoundly strong. How does that shape or how did that motivate your call to run? Why throw your hat in the ring to run for politics? That sounds like a crazy thing to do, with all due respect.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's since last summer when I decided to the idea, formulated to actually do this. There's been several surreal moments along the way. From actually just sitting and down and talking with my wife and my children. And this was not an easy decision that we came to. And again, I hope everybody notices that I said we and not I came to. Because I relied heavily on visiting with my family, knowing what the potential sacrifices will be, are going to be, are right now, and but like I said, what prompted me was, we sat there. I sat there last year. I think collectively we sat and watched when this administration took over last January, and we just saw this executive order after executive order coming out, and they were just like mind blowing, and just like why, who, what, where, when, why. And for those of us that are kind of political junkies, we were obviously aware of the Heritage Foundation and all of their partners and their friends and their crafting of Project 2025. And if you look at most of these executive orders, not all, but most of these executive orders, even though this president and this administration, adamantly, vehemently denied that they had any knowledge or involvement with Project 2025, really what they were doing is implementing Project 2025 via executive order. And they pushed that as far as they could. Then obviously they crafted the big, beautiful bill, and that was even furthering, the Project 2025 agenda. And now we're seeing potentially the next step in that is, the SAVE Act. And the SAVE Act is, as we all know, those of us that are worried and concerned about it, is disenfranchisement of United States citizens and their right to vote, specifically women. There's a vast majority of our women in the United States who have given up their name to take their husbands' names, and that potentially is going to be disqualify many women from voting should the passage of this bill take place. And I think that Montana's voting laws are just perfectly fine the way they are. There's absolutely no need for implementing a national law requiring all of those extra steps and verification. And really what it boils down to is it's really fear mongering by this administration, trying to rile up their base and try to keep keep the back door open when they do lose the House. And I predict they will lose the Senate as well this fall. We have a massive blue wave coming. I think everybody that's in the know is pretty much already saying that the House is turning blue. But I really do believe that we will flip the Senate as well.
Wow. And possibly with you in the Senate seat. So
Yeah.
that is it's a noble call. Thank you for raising, and like you said, you communicated where through your family, your community, you looked at the writing on the wall and you said, I have to do something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Montana is, and again, reminding audiences listening in, folks, we're very rural. The whole state is rural, is considered rural. Um, Out in Fort Belknap, particularly that's where it's real plains. And again, folks who are not too familiar with Montana, the Yellowstone and the Whitefish and the Glacier National Park, that's on the western side. But what we're talking over here is plains, it's farming.
Hmm.
Um, and it's often overlooked because it's not a tourist hub, and 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 it's very easy for folks to be forgotten by the government out there.
Hmm.
And while there's plenty of folks who would prefer it that way, that's also very problematic for a lot of reasons. In which you talk about broadband internet and workforce development, education are one of your leading policies. Can you talk about what that looks like out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you for leading into that. And I guess just also to let some of the listeners know who may not watch us. We do actually have island mountain ranges out here, and Hayes, Montana, is in the foothills of the beautiful Little Rocky Mountains. So looking at them out my window as we talk. And then we have like the snowy mountains, all the crazy mountains, so it's an amazing landscape that, there's these wide open spaces and plains, and then all of a sudden you get these island mountain ranges popping up, and they're absolutely amazing. Each island mountain range is absolutely, unique in their own way, and, real special to those of us who live near these mountains. But yeah, thank you for that. And I think you really led right into that. The eastern, I would even say 2/3 of Montana is primarily plains, open, and obviously in that landscape, in that setting, agriculture is huge, right? Agriculture is huge, and agriculture being Montana's number one industry. And we're talking both livestock and crops. And so, as important as that is, it often, our producers often, get put to the wayside because of like we said, the spotlight tends to be on western Montana, the mountains and the lakes and the streams and all that stuff. But our ag producers are really the backbone, of this state, number one industry. And I realize, I realize this, that our ag producers, by and large, most of them are Republican. And obviously, it's going to be a hard sell to try to get them to, look at me as a serious candidate. And so one of the things I've been telling folks is, I'm about as real as it gets. I don't do double speak. I'm not going to make promises on things that I can't or have no idea how to fulfill. And if I truly don't know anything, I'm going to openly admit it. I'm not going to try to baffle people with BS. I have an amazing team with me, however, and so if I get a question, and I've gotten several of them so far at some of these meetings, people ask me something, and if I truly don't know the answer, I'll say, you know what, great question, I don't know the answer. My team and I will look into this, we'll research it, and I'll be able to formulate an opinion and a plan based on that. With that said, I'm hoping that our ag producers really take a hard look at me, even though there's a D behind my name in this race. I'm very, very, very much a Montanan first before I am a Democrat, or even if I was a Republican, or if I was an independent. I look at myself as a Montanan first. And my core values just happen to identify and align with the Democratic Party. However, that doesn't mean I am going to do or follow what has happened with our politics here becoming so polarized in the last 15, 20 years. And I think that's been a huge detriment to our country, is seeing the polarization of our, I would even say weaponization of our politics. and it's like turning our two-party system into mortal and bitter enemies. And that's not what America is about. That's not what Montana is about. Montana is about, loving your neighbors, caring for your neighbors, taking care of your neighbors, making sure that everybody's being helped, and we help each other out. We give each other a hand up, and I understand, the good old bootstrap theory that everybody always talks about. The American dream. It's like, I'm doing it, I'm getting it's mine and my way, and that's great. I'm all for that. And I really do wish that as many people out there do achieve the American dream of reaching financial security, and that means making enough for you, your family, to buy a home, to buy a car, buy property, whatever it is. But if you are fortunate enough, and you do make it big, and you do start making 20, 30, 40 million dollars, then don't forget your humble beginnings, and don't forget to almost that pay it forward kind of a mentality. It's like, if you're making $100 million a year, or $100 million in net worth, then by God, share that wealth, and pay your fair share in taxes. There's no need for a person to be, actually, there is no need for any person or any business, not only in the United States, but in the world, to be a billionaire, either individual or business. There's absolutely no reason for it whatsoever, none whatsoever. And so a lot of that mentality, a lot of that mindset that has kind of evolved over the last 15, 20 years has really contributed to the decline of our healthcare out here in the eastern Montana, the decline of populations. I look back on when I was a teenager in the 1980s, and when we played schools in what was then the District 9C, which is like heart of north central Montana. Almost immediately, as I went in as a freshman, there were multiple schools. As I was leaving a senior 4 years later, many of our schools along the High Line were already starting to have to combine their schools, basically because we were starting to see populations of Montanans starting to emigrate out because of the lack of support, the lack of funding. I mean, there's a whole litany of things we can go on and into, but really, we're just not seeing the support there for our rural communities, our rural healthcare, and really that is coming down to administrations choosing to side with those who contribute most to a candidate's campaign, and whatever. And then there's the dreaded political good old boy system that we are subjected to. And I'm absolutely all about bucking that. I'm not a good old boy. I'm not going to be a good old boy, and I won't be a good old boy, because I want to be here for every single Montanan, even if I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to become the next senator for Montana. Even for those that didn't vote for me, maybe even for those that don't like me, I'm still going to go to bat for them. I'm still going to go to work for them, and I'm still going to do what I have to do to make sure that their lives are as comfortable as possible, and that they can achieve that American dream in agriculture, or else in healthcare, or whatever chosen profession. Teachers. Unions are huge, in Montana as well. And so I hope that I can really break through to common sense people, and knowing that I'm going to be here for the greater good of Montanans, and not just a select few people here and there. Or I'm not going in and just saying, I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to do anything and everything for a select group of Montanans, and everybody else can just go to hell. That's not what this is about. That's not what real politics and real political leadership is about. That leadership is about doing the best that you can for the greater good of everybody every day that you are in office, and every day that you are doing your best to make sure that every Montanan has a fair chance at a great life.
Well, and I appreciate that too because kind of going back to the original question, that broadband internet, that workforce development, that education, that healthcare,
Yeah,
that's nonpartisan. Like that's bringing up the
absolutely.
whole community. Like that's
Yeah.
not you should just get these because you voted for me. I want the whole community to be able to be connected, educated, informed.
Absolutely. And so, we here at Fort Belknap, we barely got broadband a few years ago, like 2 summers ago. The all the fiber optic was laid over a couple of years here at Fort Belknap. And so, the fiber optic that was laid in here, obviously we've had high-speed internet throughout Montana for, better part of a decade for most places. Well, we just got it in Hayes, and a few years ago, and I know that there are many more places that need it as well. And so, broadband, fiber optic, improving those opportunities. I mean, it only opens the door even more when we have broadband and fiber optic in place in all of our rural communities. It just really, really lends to the entrepreneurial spirit, that most Americans, have, and really, need the opportunity and have the internet and the speed, the data, the ability to store all the data and all that stuff to really help people to, open many more doors that may not have been there, just a couple years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely a whole new world. And that's what the government should be advocating for. I know that Americans love the free market and it has a lot of benefits, but one of the things about the free market is it's not going to come to places, the rural areas, unless the government steps in and puts pressure. And the government is us. It's the people. It's us saying you've got to do this. Can you talk a little bit about just while we're talking about reservation? What have you seen or heard in relation to DHS or ICE in your area or by your
Yeah,
constituents?
yeah. So I know that DHS had come and visited with each respective tribal government over the last several months. And I think that, I wasn't in those meetings, not really privy to them, but I think what they were doing was, trying to explore potential cooperative agreements with tribal nations in regards to illegal immigration and all of that, stuff that going along like that. And I think that it was, for better or worse, was, kind of ill-timed. And I think obviously it was a reactionary thing from DHS. I think that because of what was going on and, we were seeing happening throughout, the cities where they were beefing up the ICE enforcement and presence, and particularly Minneapolis, the Twin Cities area, which, by the way, has a huge Native population. And, to my understanding is they are still detaining, actual members of federally recognized tribes, and they are still not releasing them. And why they're detaining them, I don't know. But we there are a lot of things, I think, a lot of factors behind that. But really, I think when we look at a situation like this, I think that it comes down to basically just fundamental human decency. Just being a decent human being, and we tend to forget that from a political perspective in regards to it almost allows us to dehumanize those that don't agree with us. And I think that dehumanization has gone way too far overboard. And we look at things that immigrants that are here, literally taking and ripping children away from either their mothers or their fathers, knowing full well that that little 4 or 5 year old baby is not a drug dealer, they're not a gang member, and more than likely the mother probably isn't either, you know. And that's just fundamentally wrong on a human level, irregardless of what your politics are, irregardless of where your political stance is. To come and separate a baby from their parent and their caregiver, that is instilling trauma into that child, into those children. Think of all the children right now that are in these detention centers that have been separated from their parents. They are, we are giving those children post traumatic stress right now as a government. And to me, it's absolutely shocking that more people are not upset over that. And now those children will have to live an entire lifetime with post traumatic stress. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing on us as Americans, and where we're supposed to be the land of the free. And so we need to stop being hypocritical about claiming send us your weak and send us your poor, and this is the land of the free where everybody could come and achieve the American dream. This administration is not living up to those standards at which the American forefathers laid down for the United States.
And it's not, and um, it's sickening. I know that you talked about healthcare earlier, but it's ICE, the whole having a paramilitary when we already have so much of our taxes going to our regular military,
Mhm.
when just like you were just saying, like you just want broadband internet, you just want workforce development. Like, what are we doing with all of these militaries when like the people need resources? And um, I know that you're certainly proud of your son. He is a combat veteran,
Mhm.
I believe for the U.S. Army, and also historically, Native Americans have served in every American war since the Revolution. Can you talk a little bit
Absolutely.
about that
Yeah.
relationship between Native tribes and military?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, first and foremost, I have the utmost respect for any and all veterans, both those who just enlisted and served in peacetime, and our combat veterans. I think that especially our combat veterans who volunteered and weren't drafted into a conflict, who willingly stepped up and said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do what I have to do to help make sure and ensure that our country, the United States of America, is protected, and I'm going to serve, and I want to do it in an honorable way. And like you said, historically speaking, well, not Montana, Native Americans have served disproportionately higher per capita than any other ethnicity in America. And that's pretty much every single conflict. And even back in World War One, and I believe it was maybe World War Two, where Native Americans weren't even United States citizens, and they were enlisting in droves. And so it really there's several things that contributed to that. And I think first and foremost is, you know, when you come from warrior a warrior society that's that holds a warrior in such high esteem, and that society has been in existence for thousands of years. You just don't shut the switch off on that warrior mentality. I would even dare to say it's in our genes. It's essentially us. And so for Native Americans to step up and serve and volunteer in times of war, for a country that, quite honestly, didn't really like or care for them at a given point. That to me is like, the true definition of a warrior, stepping up and protecting the people no matter what. And so, before I get into about the spending on that, I just wanted to make sure and clarify that I do have that utmost respect for the military, for our veterans. My wife and I, our oldest son, he enlisted on his own during wartime. He is a Afghanistan combat veteran, and we're very proud of him. And I think one of the contributing factors as well why we as Native Americans serve in such a higher capacity is, there are certain things among our respective tribes, and I'm not speaking for all tribes, but most tribes, if not all, we have certain ceremonies, we have certain aspects of our cultural life that in order to carry on some of these ways, we have to have, in essence, true warriors, combat veterans, in order for these ceremonies and these things to take place. And so I think that's also a contributing factor. Is that's why we have so many Native Americans who step up and serve in the United States military, and ultimately, many of them pay the ultimate sacrifice. Many have, they lost their lives in combat. Many also come back and deal with post-traumatic stress, and seeing those near and dear to me experience that as well. One thing that I really am going to advocate and push for is, should I become, the next senator for Montana, is, if you are a combat veteran, then we're gonna push for legislation that says combat veteran 100% disability payment. And I don't even like calling it disability, because that's not, they sacrificed so many things. And so as big and as proud as we are about our military and being patriotic, our VA sure treats them like they're criminals, and they're trying to cheat and job the system just to try to get money out of them. And so I would personally.
Uh-oh. Officially announced, like, yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, so sorry, folks. There was a technical glitch. We were just wrapping up the question about veterans in Montana and Mr. Blackwolf's very intentional leadership. So thank you again. And just folks, just to jog y'all, a good 10% of Montanans are veterans, and a good 18% work for the VA. And then, as mentioned, some of the highest capacity of not only Americans, but also Native Americans are here in Montana that have served the military. So a lot of military involvement, participation by all for a long time. What you were talking about are crafting more policies, particularly for veterans of combat.
Yeah, yeah. And so just to finish that thought, again, like I said, our combat veterans, they have to go through their rating, to get their hard-earned money. And to me, it was, if we're going to, if we're going to be as patriotic as we are, the claim we are as a nation about our military and our veterans, if you're a combat veteran, it should just be a done deal. You prove that you served in combat, 100% rating, just like that. I guess so. Then moving on to kind of what you were talking, I think we were going to get into was about our military and our budget. I think that everything needs checks and balances, and unfortunately, I think that in our society that we live in, that is, no, not Montana, United States is a capitalistic society, and obviously, from a capitalistic standpoint, the less regulations that are in place, the better off a capitalist society is going to do. I mean, fundamentally, in a theoretical perspective, that may be true, but in realistically implementing such a thing is that there are those that ultimately have to pay the price for that capitalist or that group of capitalistic people or groups or businesses to thrive. And that, obviously instills the class system, lower class, poor, working poor, lower class, middle class, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes, it's those classes that bear the brunt of the financial burden, for a capitalistic society, and so checks and simple, common sense checks and balances on our infrastructure of everything, military. Do we really have to have a military budget that is as big as it is? Our good friends on the Republican side of the aisle, they're always talking about being fiscally responsible and, making sure we're cutting everything where we can, wherever it is, and then turn around and dump almost seemingly endless amounts of money into the military. And, again, common sense. Let's talk about, realistically, what do we need? Realistically, what does this nation need in order for it to provide for our safety and our defense as a nation, not necessarily, being the police force of the world. I think that there's a lot of different things that we can look at there. Obviously, we don't need the military all the time doing that. We have humanitarian efforts. We had humanitarian aid, which I would really push hard for reinstituting. Should I become, the next senator for Montana? Offering a hand and some food goes a lot farther than pointing a gun at somebody. And so I think that there's a lot of room to improve on our international relations moving forward, and after November of 2026.
Well, thank you, and I there's so much, like you said, too many being global police, so much warfare, so much fiscal irresponsibility, like you said, and again, it's very fear based, like yeah, and I want to move into talking about the next point on your website is tribal sovereignty, and what this looks like, whether it's in response to some of what this administration has done, or just building off of efforts that tribal representatives and advocates have made. What does tribal sovereignty look like moving forward for you and your campaign?
Yeah, so I guess so. I think that is going to be one of the unique advantages that I will have, obviously, over my three Democratic hopefuls. Is knowing and fully understanding tribal sovereignty via trust and treaty responsibilities between our sovereign nations, all our tribal sovereign nations in the United States government. And, so again, for those that don't know, the United States entered into treaties with tribal nations to, this could be a day-long seminar in itself. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible and short. So basically, what the native tribes did is we agreed to give up the vast majority of our ancestral homelands to the United States, and the United States in turn agreed to provide certain things in perpetuity to tribal nations. As long as the United States exists, and as long as the United States operates the way that it does, and each state operates that it does, then the United States government has a obligation to provide the treaty obligations that they had made with the respective tribal nations. Providing health care, that is done via the Indian Health Services. Education, so there are tribal schools. There are also small grants that are given to tribes who then in turn give it to their students who want to go on to higher education. And so that also is another thing that we want to educate people on, because vast majority of people that are unaware of how that trust responsibility works with the government is they think that we get anything and everything free, which is just not true. They also think that we don't pay taxes, which is not true. I'm putting off filing my taxes here for another week or two, just because the simple fact that I owe taxes every time I file taxes. But that responsibility is and we must understand that in the United States, the Constitution, it talks about what treaties are, and treaties are the supreme law of the land. It says it clearly right in the Constitution. And so that's why there's this unique relationship in and among tribes and the United States government. And oftentimes, I should say often, sometimes the United States delegates that authority in very rare circumstances to states. But that's done very rarely. But more often than not, it's the United States, the federal government, meeting obligations with tribal nations. And so this government, or excuse me, this administration right now is failing at those obligations. If you remember last late spring, early summer, when they kind of shut the valve off of all federal funding for everything everywhere, that included money that was treaty obligated funds for tribes. And then they pushed now. And so we have on our respective reservation here at Fort Belknap, we have a Bureau of Indian Affairs office, and they are the government's representative to help make sure that funding and programs operate in a manner that is beneficial to tribes. And we had approximately 20 Bureau of Indian Affairs employees. And after all these federal cuts via Doge and other avenues, we only have 2 employees here at the Bureau of Indian Affairs now, which is making things very difficult for the day-to-day operations of the unique situation on how most tribal governments operate. We just can't operate like a traditional business, and we can't operate like a traditional government, thinking that we're a federal government. We have those responsibilities that we have to do in reporting to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who then ultimately reports it to the National Bureau of Indian Affairs, and making sure that those trust responsibilities are being met via federal dollars that are obligated to tribes. So I can honestly say that I'm about 99% sure that my 3 competitors don't know that process and don't know exactly what it is that the federal government is obligated when it comes to providing trust responsibilities to tribes.
Thank you so much for that. I know a lot of folks simply don't know. I mean, like, the myths, the misconceptions, like, about particularly when it comes to finances, taxes, benefits with
Hmm.
tribal nations is something that a lot of folks just they don't they don't know. And
Yeah, yeah.
just like you said, there's I I've noticed too, and I've been watching certain things in other states of tribal nations like playing the same game, same capitalist game because they have to. They're surviving. But how controversial it is even within their own communities of like, do we bring an AI data center here, or like, what do we do? You know what I mean? It's just there's just a lot to it, and it's a totally different. Like you said, it's not a traditional government department because it's simply it's not, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't be ran like an American corporate business either because
yeah,
it's not that either. It is
yes, yeah, 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 absolutely.
well, I know that we are getting towards the end, and I wanted to ask you this at least. One of your policies is about conservation and how water is very important, not only um, to use, but just renewable energy in general seems to be stigmatized. Talk to me a little bit about your what you're seeing and imagining for your conservation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so for me, this is obviously is near and dear to me, and this goes back to my fundamental teachings of being a indigenous person to North America, and we are we look at we often look at Western society often looks at everything as a resource. Everything is a resource, whether it's water, land, animals, plants, and they are there for our benefit and for our the bettering of us, oftentimes as individuals. And it's treated in that process as an infinite. All these things are treated as infinite resources, and they're not. And when you look at things from an indigenous worldview, we're not here to dominate. We're just part of this entire thing that we call life. Uh, you know, we certainly need clean water. We certainly need food. Those two fundamental things right there. No food, no water, no life. You know, and if it is almost too simplistic in its reality for most people to understand. They think that, oh, well, there's clean water over there, so I can pollute this water so that my business can run and I can make a fortune. And this one stream will be, the world will be okay with this one stream being polluted or the ground being polluted because there's millions upon acres and there's millions of streams out there. But you take a million business owners that are out there and they want to do the exact same thing. They all want to pollute the stream by them, or they all want to pollute the ground by them. Then it's a compounding issue, and we tend to end up with water that we can't use and ground that we can't use otherwise. And so we are, and it really is, it comes down to a person's, core fundamental upbringing. And I think that, good, bad, and different. I think a lot of democratic minded people who are definitely more open minded to the idea of, that we need to take care of our plants, we need to take care of our animals, we need to take care of our water in order for all of us to live. No clean water, none of.
When I did this with Cleveland Russell on the other side of the divide, he's running
Yeah,
for. Uh,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
his did the same thing. It was like
yeah.
I had to like stitch the podcast together from five different cuts. So Wi-Fi is
Okay.
real,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
I think you were just about done, and not done. No, you were finishing. You were like in the middle of a thought. I can't remember if you had finished the sentence
Oh,
or not.
the water and stuff.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so, again, what I just stated, though, obviously, I one of the things I am is I'm an absolute realist, and I know that business does have to happen, agriculture has to happen, both crops and livestock, in order for our economies to function. And so finding that middle ground is going to be key. Our my way or the highway mentality that we have adopted in politics over the, like I said, the last 10, 15 years has just been, super detrimental. And so I think that I'm in a unique position to where I think that I have the real, like, to be able to just sit down and say, I'm not going to be able to please everybody all the time. I'm not going to be able to please the agricultural industry 100% of the time. I'm not going to be able to please the conservation people 100% of the time. And that's just the reality of politics. And I think people need to be truthful and honest about that. We have to, because, I could talk the toughest game about providing this and that, and I am a die-hard conservationist, and I will die on my hill, and then I get into Washington D.C. and I have to compromise. Well, all those die-hard conservationists are now going to turn on me, and the fact of the matter is that we do have to compromise, and that's just the reality of it. Not everybody's going to win 100% of the time in everything that they do in their life. Politics is no exception. And I think that realizing and doing what is best for the greater good for everybody is, something that I think is I'm going to be able to really provide for our constituents. And I think that the sooner that I have been telling people this, the more that they will realize that, hey, this guy's a realist, and I know that, I may want him to vote for everything that I'm putting for him 100% of the time, but I also need to realize that he's probably not going to, and I'm okay with that, just as long as he puts a best foot effort forward to provide what's best for the greater good of Montanans.
Well, thank you for that. Well, as we get closer to the top of the hour, can you tell us where folks who are interested in donating, supporting, or following you, how can they learn more about you and your campaign?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so my website is www.blackwolf4 Montana spelt out.com. And on there, you can watch my little intro video. I think I hit most of the points we talked about here, but I'm really proud of that video. That video, I think, really kind of encapsulates, what I am, who I am, I think what I have to offer. And, and I'm not that status quo, politician who, it was just like going to, get there and do backdoor dealings and whatnot. And I may fall on my face, but that's all right. But at least, I have my ethics and my morals, and I'm going to stick to those. But also there, I have a direct link to my Act Blue. My Act Blue link is on the website. Just to let people know, I am keeping this as grassroots as possible. This campaign is, I'm not taking dark money. I'm not taking like super PAC money. And so this really is a people powered campaign. And any and all help that anybody can help and contribute is much appreciated, because like I stated, several times, and I really do honestly mean that, I want to be able to provide for the best that of my ability to the greater good of every Montanan. And I think that, getting to DC without any, big money, big pharma, big oil, no APAC, anything like that, it just makes it all the more real for me to show people that just how honest I am and how real I am about and how serious I'm taking this run for United States Senate.
Oh, Thank you so much. And I know a lot of people appreciate the grassroots fundraising, and because folks are just exhausted. They don't, what is all of this politics of corporations can just buy everybody? And,
Absolutely.
uh, and that's what
Absolutely.
we need is people representing the people. So,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for joining me. Are there any last words before I wrap up the episode?
Oh, I guess last words. I think one thing I wanted to touch on is, I hear you, Montana. I do. I really do hear you. I know that the three primary things people are concerned right now about are groceries, utilities, and healthcare. And, those are all intimately tied with the way this country is being run right now. And my appeal to all of you out there is this: even though I am a Democrat and I'm running on a Democratic ticket, this election cycle 2026 is not about the traditional Republican versus Democrat. It's not that those old school meet in the middle politics have gone the wayside. We want to get back to that. But what this is about, this election cycle is about the top, the elite, wealthy Americans versus the rest of us. And I'm really imploring and I'm really in encouraging our moderate Republicans, our independents in Montana, to really take a hard look at what it is and where we want this country to go, where we want Montana to go. And the more you take a real hard self inflection and look at that, I think that you will realize that I can offer more than what the current Republican candidates have to offer. I also think I have offer more than my competitors, my Democratic primary competitors as well. And I really do feel like I am the best uh, candidate, and I think that I would be the best senator in this election cycle for the state of Montana. And so, with that, I really do thank you for having me, and I appreciate having the opportunity to share a little bit about myself with you and with good people of Montana.
Absolutely. No, I'm grateful to have you. And again, thank you for raising your hand to run for office and represent Montanans. And you're in my district, so I mean, you would be representing me. It was, of course, not a no-brainer to host you. And folks, I'm really curious what you had to think about this episode. Um, I think I would like to have you back in a non-political campaign setting just to talk about more tribal affairs and educate people because, again, they don't know.
Yeah,
But
would love to.
until, please, yeah. But for my listeners, audiences, let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Uh, you know the drill. We do this all the time. Folks, this is your host, Lee Larson. And this is another episode of Follow the Leader. And until next time, see ya. All right.